This week, we welcome Paul Baird, Chief Technical Security Officer at Qualys, to discuss maximizing risk reduction in your security program. In the leadership and communication section, cybersecurity is too important to have a dysfunctional team. In a crisis, great leaders prioritize listening. White House announces stricter cybersecurity guidelines and rules, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly.
Managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100, today, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. Is your organization finding it difficult to achieve compliance and scale its security posture? As G2's highest rated cloud compliance software, Drata streamlines your SOC 2, ISO 27001, PCI DSS, HIPAA, GDPR, and many more security frameworks, and provides continuous 24-hour control monitoring so you can focus on scaling securely. Drata is also the only compliance automation platform with a private tenant database. That's like having your cake and securing it too. Listeners of Business Security Weekly get 10% off Drata by visiting securityweekly.com/Drata. That's DRATA.
Cybercriminals are working overtime. Last year in the fourth quarter alone, phishing attacks disguised as COVID testing information increased by 521%. Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats and how cybercriminals use them to steal money from your company or personal information from your employees and customers. Find out about the 13 email threat types and how Barracuda can provide complete email protection for your teams, your customers, and your reputation. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 277, recorded September 19th, 2022. I am your host, Matt Alderman, back from a very productive executive offsite. Joining remotely are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Matt. Great to have you back. I didn't get to cry in front of you last week as my Patriots totally flubbed, but we made up for it this week. No doubt about it.
We're going to talk about that in the second segment. I got some insights 2 weeks in already. Also joining today from Idaho, Mr. Tyler Robinson. I think you're in Idaho.
I definitely am.
Okay.
Not the nice whiskey capital of the world like others, but we have some potato vodka.
Oh, good. Well, we can try that soon.
No, don't.
Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions often and will reach out to you once reviewed. Security Weekly listeners save 20% on InfoSec World 2022 passes. InfoSec World will be held next week, September 27th through the 29th at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort in Lake Buena Vista, Florida. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW and use the code ISW22-SecWeek20 to secure your spot now. This segment is sponsored by Qualys. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Qualys. Paul Baird is an IT veteran with over 24 years experience, with the last 7 focusing on cybersecurity. Paul's background has included building a security ethos and security operations center from scratch for several leading enterprises in the UK housing and automotive industries. Having moved to the vendor side to join Qualys as their Chief Technical Security Officer in 2021, he now drives Qualys' vision for cybersecurity at the C-level across customers and partners in the UK and North EMEA. Paul was awarded a fellowship by the Chartered Institute of Information Security last year for his continued contribution to cybersecurity. Paul, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Matt, thank you for having me on.
A pleasure. So we're going to talk about risk reduction. And so I'm going to start with risk, the final frontier. Will we ever get there?
Risk is such a dirty word, isn't it? Love-hate relationship with risk. I think every IT and every security professional does.
Yeah, and as we were prepping for this, you said something very interesting to me. It's not about IT. It's not about security. It's about business risk, and managing it from a business perspective. And I think that's the evolution we're still struggling with, is how do we understand how to align what we're doing from an IT security perspective to what the business needs to manage, which is business risk. And I think that's still that's why I say it's the final frontier, because we haven't figured it out yet.
No, I think if we do, or whoever can figure this out is going to make an awful lot of money. And a lot of people very, very happy. There's still too many CISOs in this world thinking that their cyber risks are their problem. And it's not, as you've mentioned, as we talked about before, it is a business risk. And it's taking this very technical world that we live in and being able to sort of quantify it into business risks that everybody in the business understands. Every other department within an organization has done that, so why can't cybersecurity?
Yeah, that is the $1 billion+ question, right? Is why can't we? And everybody else has. And I know Jason and others on this show, we've talked about this for a long time. And it's just this disconnect between what we think from a technology perspective to what we really want to align and understand from a business perspective. And, I think some CISOs have done a really good job bridging that, right? But you're right, there's still a large part of the industry out there that's not aligned there. And so I guess the question is, where do we start? Like, how do we start down this path?
For me, visibility, first and foremost. I think CISOs need to take a little step back from their strategies. They go in very headstrong, and I'm not saying this is all CISOs. This is just the ones that I've had the pleasure of working with over many years, and they go for the shiny toys, the seams, your endpoint detections, when really they should look at their strategy, look at the business, and start from the basics, which is visibility first and foremost.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, Matt knows that I've had a mantra on this show for probably a couple of years, and probably more than that, actually. And it's, CISOs, start learning how to manage business risk, or you're going to report to someone who does. That's been my mantra for quite a while, right? And you're absolutely right. So many folks get into their role and chase the shiny object instead of listening, sitting down with the business, learning the business, and then really aligning their strategy to the outcomes the business is looking to achieve. I had a very, very smart CFO tell me one day, come to the table with the problem I need to solve and the risk that I need to remediate. Because if I came to the table with conversations around vulnerabilities, okay, what's the risk to the business? If I didn't have that answer, I would get walked out of the room, right? Because the CFO said to me, listen, if someone's attacking a marketing server and there's marketing data on it, feel free, spread it around the world. I don't see that as a business risk. If they're spreading PDFs all over the world, right? It's a question of what is the risk to the business. And I think that was his way just to kind of get under my skin and say, listen, you have to bring what the risk to the business to the table in order for me to want to invest in it.
So as a new CISO, or as a CISO even that's been at an organization for a while, how do you quantify and qualify in order to prioritize what that business risk is out of the gate? Or even if you're evaluating your current situation, how do you actually go about doing that properly?
Great question. I think Jason touched on it. It's listening to the rest of the business, first of all, and then looking at your corner of the world to understand what risks you have. A lot of vulnerability management programs focus on how many vulnerabilities the organization has. And I've worked for organizations where we've switched on a vulnerability management solution and we're in the millions of vulnerabilities. And we can talk about remediation and patching a little bit later on. But sometimes you just want to switch these vulnerability management programs off and just forget about them because it is such a massive challenge. So it's understanding the business and then prioritizing those vulnerabilities, getting to understand what really matters to the business, and not just taking traditional CVSS scores as an example. Understanding truly what would happen if this server A got compromised because of this vulnerability. What would truly happen to the business? Would the business stop? Is it taking down, IT's Quake server so they won't be able to play games for the next half an hour? Or is it actually stopping in the manufacturing plant? Is it stopping marketing?
And to Jason's point, like the big kind of gap here, I think, is knowing what you have and what's critical to the business, right? It starts, I think, and I said this in our prep call, like understanding what I have. It's asset management 101. Where are my critical assets? Where is my critical data? Where are my critical systems that I need to protect? And it sounds so boring, but I think the challenge is if you don't understand where the critical stuff is in the environment, you're never going to walk down a path of risk because there's no way to understand the impact or be able to understand that impact to the business if you don't understand where those critical assets are. But so many people don't want to start with the boring, where are my assets, what's critical, what's not critical as part of the equation. And that's really where I think most organizations suffer and need to start.
And Matt, just to take that to the next level, it's not just about software data. It's about where are the critical processes within the organization? Where are the critical people and roles, right? I mean, if you're involved in staff augmentation as part of your business and you're sticking bodies in other businesses, you need to know what risk that could bring to the table. So not just hardware, software, data, your technologies, but it's people and process as well. You need to know overall business risk, right? And that's what you bring to the table. I mean, being in IT services, those are risks that we identify. We treat that as an asset that we manage, right? We'll treat folks that we put in businesses as consultants as an asset that we have to manage.
Yeah, and carrying on from that, Jason, it's understanding who owns that asset, because that asset could change hands 20 times within a year. And at 3:00 in the morning, or normally 4:30 on a Friday afternoon when that bad actor hits, you need to know where these people are, and you need to be able to get hold of these people to understand what the ramifications are for that system going down.
How do you go about getting some of those relationships established as a leader early out of the gate and get some of the buy-in, not only from the top down, but from your bottom up, which tends to be actually more actionable and needed, especially when you're talking about incidents? Some of those strategies may be critical for how you go about being able to deploy whatever roadmap or whatever function that you're trying to accomplish at that point in time.
Dare I say it, soft skills. Again, I see them. I see CISOs in two camps, either extremely technical or have that business acumen. There's very few CISOs out there. They are few and far between that have both. And if you do have both, then you are at the top of your game. And it's understanding, as we've said before, it's understanding the business, understanding the people that are running the business, and just listening to them and aligning to them. You could have somebody that's been in IT or service delivery for the last 20 years. That information is priceless. And sitting down with them and their teams to understand their processes, as Jason mentioned earlier on, what they're doing to tackle the current issues, and then trying to align your strategy to their processes. So you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're trying to fit in with the rest of the business. Sure, you've got to put your own spin on things, and you do have to go in your direction eventually, but it takes time. There's too many shock and awe CISOs out there. It is a long game.
Yeah, few news articles lately with some of the shock and awe CISOs, so we'll avoid those for now. But we're going to talk about listening skills in the second segment, because there's a couple interesting leadership articles that we pulled in around listening. But it's also effectively communicating with the business, right? So yes, we need to listen, understand critical processes, understand those things, but then be able to communicate back to the business in a way that they understand, because it's not about bits and bytes. It's not about vulnerabilities and incidents. It's about why certain things need, we have to think about them more from a risk or a crisis management or some other aspect that the business understands. If we're talking technical speeds and feeds back, the business isn't going to understand those.
The language that the business has talked for many years is risk, and IT and security are just catching up with that, learning that language and getting that right. As you said, talking in terms that the business understands. So when you go to the board to say you have these critical vulnerabilities that are currently being exploited by a bad actor, they're not going to understand what you're saying. If you go in to say that your manufacturing side is going to go down, you're going to lose 100 million a day because you can't produce X, Y, and Z, they get it.
Yeah. So how do we flip the script, right? So Paul, as I think about on the vendor side, right? Because part of this comes from the vendor ecosystem as well, right? Qualys has been talking a lot about risk management lately. I'm in the risk management space from the human side. So how should we as the industry be talking back to our CISO audiences to help put them in a better position to talk risk and not vulnerability?
Yeah, I mean, it is vendors like Qualys that are leading the way with this ability to translate very technical information into business context. We're doing the work for the security teams and for the CISO. We're taking that business context. We're taking those mitigated controls. We're taking threat intelligence and wrapping that all together to present that back to the vulnerability management team and the CISO to say, these are the priorities that you need to be looking at now. Forget about the rest. I mean, there was this, if you look at CVE details, there's give or take about 180,000 CVEs since they started recording them. But if you look at CISA, there's only around about 815 known exploited vulnerabilities at the moment. So again, it's been able to take that data and representing it back so it's manageable to the board and to the rest of the business. Because for such a long time, security has gone into these sessions with a negative conversation. We're always the ones that are asking for more money. We're always the ones that say that, we're going to get hit by the latest ransomware. We're in trouble. Well, if that is the case, and it might be true, let's bring the facts to the table, but facts that the business will understand.
Yeah, and I mean that's key. You know what I mean? In order, and we're going to talk about this in the next segment. Trust is the foundation of every relationship that you're going to have within the business. So there's no better period if you're a new CISO than the honeymoon period. You can ask any question on the face of this earth and it will not sound stupid. You leverage that time, leverage the honeymoon period and ask a lot of questions. Listen to what your stakeholders are going to give back to you. Speak in their language, speak in their terms, learn the business. Having a tool like Qualys that can help translate is wonderful. It's a great asset to have in your toolbox. But the ability to communicate and build trusting relationships is critical so you can use those tools and have the right conversation. So, I don't want to minimize the fact that having good relationships, speaking the language of the business, learning how your business operates, and know your audience. If you're speaking to the CFO, you may communicate a little bit differently than speaking to the HR leader, right? You have to know your audience and how to communicate back to the business.
It also helps to build those relationships and preemptively go to each of those and start to establish that trust, educate, put in a little bit of effort in the front rather than going and asking for something or dealing with it during an incident. Both of those are pulling in, requiring things of people that have, you're not able to establish that relationship as well. So if you get that trust built before where you're not requiring anything and you're actually bringing something to the table, that goes quite a long ways to preemptively get that established early.
Yeah. And Tyler, to your point, a great tool in the toolbox is establish one-on-ones. Could be a half an hour, right? Just have a cadence with those stakeholders, with those business leaders. We always talk about the cliche of CISOs wanting a seat at the table. Well, this is what comes with it, right? Learning the business, knowing how to leverage communication in order to get an outcome to the table, knowing what outcomes those stakeholders are trying to achieve so you can align to them, right? That's what we need to be doing. It comes with that quote unquote political aspect to it, right? That relationship building aspect to it.
The GRC teams are sometimes forgotten about, and it's engaging with the GRC teams. And with platforms like Qualys, we're very open about how we calculate our risk, and it's showing the risk teams how we get to C by adding A and B together. So we're very transparent with that, and the risk teams absolutely love that. So again, it's something that they can quantify. They understand how we have taken this very technical data and how we have got to the score that we've got to. And they are very powerful advocates to have on your side when you're going to the board.
Because the challenge now is, I think, when you bring the GRC team in, the scope is so broad, right? You've got human elements, you have compliance components, you have what's coming from Qualys from a device asset perspective, and it's correlating all that data, right? This has been a big challenge in the industry. Like I said, it's kind of the next frontier. And to be open with how those calculations are coming in, how they leverage the data from your products mixed in with all the other things that are there, gives you a better kind of view of risk. I'm just curious, like, have you seen a lot of customers adopting these integration platforms? I hear a lot about these analytics-based platforms like the GRCs and others. Are they realizing the benefit of some of those, or do they rely more on some of the individual products, Paul, to give them what they need?
I think the latter was the case traditionally. We've heard that the best in breed, and I was guilty of that many years ago of going out and picking the best EDR product, the best SIEM solution, the best vulnerability management solution. But when you try to start to pull all these together and get them to talk, that's when you start to have the issues. So looking at what Qualys is doing from a solution-based view, it means that all of our products are talking the same language. So therefore, we can then translate that a lot easier back to the GRC teams again. So we've seen a lot of customers starting to look for solutions rather than just individual tools in their toolbox.
Yeah, Jason, we've talked about this a lot, right? The consolidation 100%. Of vendors. Can I do more with one product instead of having 60 to 70 products? Can I have, a half a dozen products that give me what I need? Because it's too hard to tie it in. Yeah.
It's that ecosystem approach where you can get better context, right? You may not have that magic quadrant leader in every aspect, but if you can get an ecosystem that's communicating and sharing context, you're going to be in a way better position instead of 60 silos that are happening within your organization because you have 60 different tools.
So I mean, if you take,
your products.
Sorry, Tyler.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, it's just like your products. Your products need to communicate effectively and interact and interop together, just like the people that you're working with as a CISO. It correlates directly in both directions.
I mean, if you take vulnerability management as an example, I've seen many organizations that have their specific OT vulnerability management solution, their IT vulnerability management solution, their cloud or container vulnerability management solutions, and all three of these just do not talk together. Vulnerabilities are vulnerabilities, and being able to put them all under one umbrella.
Yes, to prioritize across all the different vulnerability types, right? Because each criticality is slightly different depending on where it is, whether it's in your OT systems, your IT systems, your applications, your cloud environment. Context matters. So that brings me to the last point, right? Let's think about remediation. Where do we go from here? A lot of discussions about, the SOAR platforms and, the integration of SIMs and SOARs. You've seen the evolution of XDR, but we've still not gotten to nirvana from a remediation perspective, except for Qualys has made some very interesting moves in this space. And Paul, how does all this tie together more effectively for you from a platform perspective? Because some of the things you can do in the platform are great. Other things you probably give to a SOAR vendor to do. How do you understand those balances of what do you do about remediation?
Remediation is something that we've ignored for a very long time. We are very good, and I say we, CISOs, heads of, SOC managers, we're very good at spinning up vulnerability management platforms, producing massive Excel spreadsheets to then pass on to the IT and the service delivery teams to fix. Qualys is changing that, and again, bringing that into that all-encompassing solution. And you touched on a point, and I wish I had Qualys 3 or 4 years ago with what its capabilities are now. I mean, traditionally, if an EDR triggers because of a malware, that's really the event. As long as the EDR tool has done its job, quarantined the malware, removed it, deleted it, generally you don't have time for your threat hunters and your SOC analysts to go away and find out why that happened. Qualys is looking at it a little bit differently now. What we're interested in is why did that take a foothold in the first place? Is there vulnerabilities on the machine that could be patched? Are there misconfigurations through policy compliance that could be patched that caused that malware to take a foothold? And we're now presenting this information back to the IT and security teams to be able to go and fix it so it doesn't happen again. Which it's like the Dutch boy with his fingers in the dike. We're actually given the opportunity now, getting a little bit of cement on that hole, rather than somebody sitting there with their fingers in in a dike all day, every day.
Well, having that visualization too across multiple platforms for remediation allows leadership to understand if you have a technology gap, do you have a resource gap, without combining all of those into something that is useful. You're taking disparate information and trying to correlate that with inside of your mind. That doesn't allow many of the leaders to have that full visibility scope within inside of an organization and appropriately plan that.
And we're getting to that point now of, we talked about SOAR platforms, or Matt, you brought up SOAR platforms. The automation within the vulnerability and the patching space is key, I think, for us to get ahead of the bad actors. They're automating everything, so why shouldn't we? And take that low-hanging fruit. It could be, your Chrome browser, your Adobe Acrobat, that are always updated. There is next to no risk to the business to update these, yet it's taking, armies of IT and security people to patch these. So automating the low-hanging fruit, allowing teams to be released to go after the bigger problems within an organization.
Yeah, Tyler, you said it, right? Visibility, kind of where Paul started this conversation, is get visibility across technology, people, process, all the components, right? And being able to see that data to do something about it, because it's always been about outcome, right? And the further left I can move the outcomes, the less impact I create to the environment, and impact is a big part of the risk equation, right? And I think we have to think about that. We, at Living Security, we talk about left of boom. Like, how do we do things proactively to prevent the breach from happening? Qualys, having the data, is in a better position to on that left side of boom before you have to get your SIM, SOAR, incident response teams, and everybody else engaged. But you've got to have the visibility across the stack to be able to do that. Otherwise, you're flying blind.
Yeah, and it's visibility and the understanding that you can bring to the rest of the business, right? Because if you're taking that information and, to Paul's point, it translates to the business, now you can have active sharing of the information with your GRC team, with your legal team, with your finance team, and you can be showing them in real time. Now you're all on the same page. There's nothing more powerful than going to a board of directors meeting or at an executive meeting where you have a united front. You have a united front on a strategy to be able to remediate the risks that are in front of the business. What better way to do that than have all of your executives on the same page, looking at the same data, same dashboard, translated back to the business? That's how you bring a united front. That's how you get investment. That's how you show risk to the board of directors. Because now you have not just the CISO or the CIO spouting the risk. It's the entire business line, right?
Absolutely. Paul, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
No, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's my first time on the show, and I've loved every moment of it.
Well, as a great sponsor, I'm sure we'll have you back. To learn how to reduce risk in your cybersecurity program or to learn more about Qualys, please visit securityweekly.com/Qualys. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.